Welcome to Propmodo's Decoding Real Estate podcast, where we break down the big trends shaping the commercial real estate industry. I'm your host, Franco Ferrato, editor of Propmodo. And in this special episode, sponsored by Aislelabs, we're talking about how retail real estate is making better decisions thanks to location and Wi-Fi data. Retail real estate has always been a business of knowing people, who they are, where they go, and how they shop. But in a changing retail landscape, where almost anything can be bought online, understanding shopper behavior means knowing more than just foot traffic. Landlords and retailers are using multiple different data sources to get a deeper look into what's happening inside shopping centers. From people counters to location intelligence to Wi-Fi analytics, the tools are evolving fast, and the insights they provide are becoming indispensable for both landlords and retailers. These technologies are helping retailers understand what to stock and providing landlords with valuable data about the most accretive tenant mix and how to bring in more shoppers. To help me understand the ways that retailer real estate can leverage data, I talked to Garrett Schemmel, Executive Vice President at Aislelabs. Garrett has spent years helping landlords and retailers turn raw data into actionable insights. We talk about how new technologies are transforming the way we think about retail spaces. Garrett, thanks for coming on the podcast.
It's great to be here, Franco.
You know, retail real estate is fascinating to me. It was dead, apparently, based on all of the reports that came out, in the last maybe 5 years. And lo and behold, it seems to have survived. It now has kind of become one of these, I would say, one of the darlings of investors, of real estate investors, just because it has done so well, performed so well. And I know some of the reason that the retail real estate has been able to do so well is just because they've gotten, retail owners have gotten more sophisticated in how they understand their properties, right? How they are able to find their new tenants. So talk to me about some of the technologies that are available now for retail real estate owners to be able to kind of collect the data that is really going to help them improve their NOI.
Absolutely. Data is a product person. Data is a service person. I really always take an extra moment to distinguish between things like software and data, right? So if you look at, let's call it secondary data that maybe you buy or you rent, that's not your data. There's a lot of data there. And warning, I'm not a census data expert, but there's a lot of data out off property that don't come from your own systems that have been going back a long time, right? So buying data, understand what are the personas within the zip codes near me to help to direct market, to generally understand where your visitors are coming from. There are a lot of those that have been around for quite a while. We've seen the rise of mobility data. So that's not your data, but that's metadata that comes from mobile data aggregators. I'll use some phrases here to make data points comparison. So as you talk about data, you want to talk about, or data products, you want to talk about it in the context of update frequency, data age, scope and granularity of data, quantity of data. All these things drive confidence in the insight that data provides. So if you look at mobility data, for example, it typically has a lower update frequency, typically comes in 1 month. Intervals, typically it's lower in quantity and thus accuracy compared to what may be your own proprietary data from your own systems, things like people counters or Wi-Fi analytics. But mobility data lets you compare your site to others, right? Which is pretty cool. The thing you have to be really aware of with things like with mobility data is where does it cover? So we've piloted mobility data, just curious, and also as kind of an enrichment thing. Is it helpful to us? We discovered that mobility data in quantity compared to Wi-Fi analytics data, which is, we'll talk more about that. I'm sure it's something that we're good at. It's smaller in quantity, but it's also geographically isolated. So the US, for example, let's say there's one data point per person that comes through the average mobility data vendor. Canada, you're going to get about 0.8 data points. Europe is off limits. You can't buy data because of GDPR, of course. So there's a whole nother strategy in Europe if you're a retail marketer or in retail leasing. And then the rest of the world, it falls pretty quickly. So the Middle East, it's like 0.2. So the US is uniquely structured to have mobility data within its borders compared to every other country on the planet. So that's kind of some external data inside the buildings. Obviously, it gets to be a really interesting conversation if you can tap into internal systems. Some of you may already have there like Wi-Fi, or some of you have to install like intentional people counters at doors and entrances. So those, and then it's the kind of vocabulary is around what metric do you want, right? So the classic metrics we see in retail that are really leasing driven are visits, footfall, right? And then more uniquely dwell time. And then we can talk more at some point about which systems drive those. We're also really interested in trying to pioneer as we look at the different roles in the retail environment. We see two primary roles that can be served. There's the leasing need and there's the marketer need, which we call her the built environment marketer. She's very different from, say, a SaaS marketer, where she gets her leads, the value of certain channels, all that stuff. But we're seeing some new AI-driven capabilities that are possible that can help the marketer. And we think that she has probably a richer need when it comes to data and intelligence than, say, leasing does, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean the richness of the data is a huge piece of this. There has been data. You talk about people counters and kind of sensors inside it. You kind of get a sense for how many people, when they come, when they show up. But now that is so much richer, right? And talk to me about what exactly can be learned and how that data can be captured, right? Wi-Fi is one that I would love for you to get into a little bit more, because I know that you guys do that quite a bit. But yeah, how actually can that, like, what are the data pieces that are helping enrich the information, and how is it captured?
For sure. So let's categorize the building environment. Let's focus on commercial real estate. Let's focus on a building that has unregistered access. So we're not going to talk about like an arena, for example, where I count the ticket stubs and I know how many people came in. So let's say a shopping mall, shopping center, or mixed use environment. Footfall traffic count is absolutely critical, right? So we know that the need for footfall count to have leasing acquisition and leasing renewal conversations is very important. So if you focus on that enclosed use case, right, the classic shopping mall, controlled entrances and exits to get the kind of most discrete single visit count number. People counters are quite often an ideal solution, strictly there. That you have to figure out kind of how do you want to balance a multi-entrance model. You have to figure out how you want to handle people coming in and out. Is that 2 data points? But all those things are things that have been addressed. But if you put your people counting there, that's a very common way of doing it. If you want to know a bit more about your space, right? So the bigger your space, the more zones you have. The zones start becoming interesting concepts that you want to really measure footfall count. So if you're at Mall of America in Minneapolis, Minnesota, USA, you have spaces that are massive, right? You've got an indoor water park in one area, and you're going to want to know how many people came there, because that's a multi-million-dollar revenue stream, and you have to manage it with respect. And so as you look at larger and larger spaces, there's spaces within spaces. And so that people counter use case kinds of fall apart because it doesn't tell me anything about my intra-building zones, right? And that's where Wi-Fi technology is really, really helpful. You already have it. It's infrastructure you already paid for. The technology, it's not standard access points as we call them in the space that you need. They're more enterprising. So if you have Cisco Meraki, HP Aruba, Juniper Mist, all these kind of common enterprise manufacturers, you're good to go. They provide the right kind of data. But you can just consume that data through a platform like Aislelabs, and then we use a lot of AI machine learning to turn those into zone-specific metrics. Really critical. That's for footfall count. So if you want to know how many people, again, came to like a water park or a specific space, you can do that. Or if you have a space where there's concerts inside the building, again, that's really critical for a marketer, right? So marketer is constantly, rightfully, including our own marketers, are constantly worried about making sure they show an ROI on their investments so they can get more. So so I think if you it's that zonal concept. And then the second thing that people counters can't do, for example, on a metrics basis, is dwell time or wait time. So really critical in specific environments. Obviously, understanding queuing and wait time is really critical for lots of retail environments, but also airports. We all know how critical it is to track the security zone or the check-in zone. And so wherever you can find wait time or dwell time is a critical thing. It's really important to have technology that lets you measure dwell time. So that's a way to think about it. You go into the building, classically, people counters are a very accepted thing to get one metric. As you go into the building, it's really helpful to understand for leasing use cases, dwell time and zone-specific visit metrics. Other things that, as you understand space more and utilization of space more, you can do some really cool secondary benefit things. So for example, again, in really large environments, if you're a mall in Phoenix, your air conditioning bill is going to be millions of dollars a year, right? If you can optimize that 5 or 10%, maybe there's a space that has low utilization or low occupancy in a given time of day. If you know that, maybe you can lower your air conditioning in that specific zone. Again, data points from systems like Wi-Fi analytics systems, those can take the same zonal concepts and the same data for a really strong second use case that helps the operations team and not just leasing. Is that helpful, Franco?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great. And I think, I want to focus in on the leasing piece here because I think it's so critical. Obviously every retailer is worried, more than anything about keeping retailers in place, bringing in new retailers that are, can pay top dollar. And often there's a negotiation there. And I think that this data, it's not just like, oh, it's really nice to know kind of data. This is critical to a negotiation, right? I think smart retailers realize that, footfall does not necessarily mean sales. Right. If someone comes to a store, your neighbor store, and then leaves the second they're done, that's not necessarily going to help your store. Right. So, how can, retail real estate owners have this conversation and really try to use this data to show retailers exactly what to expect from their leases?
Absolutely. So the key thing is to the zone level, right? So people counters, if you want to have an interesting tenant leasing conversation, people counters can't get you there because it's a much more nuanced conversation. So the way to think about it is you have to really accept and embrace that concept of zones, right? Inside of a property. That means your zone can be tenant defined. Here are the 3 access points around this one tenant that defines a space. With that, you can then begin as proxy, you can begin to understand those classic metrics, visit counts, dwell time, especially inside and around that specific tenant. Then you can start to do really, if you take your entire property and create zones across your entire property, then using different ways of identifying an individual without being intruding or without invading on PEI, you can understand cross visits, right? So retailers really care about talking about their tenants in the context of anchors or flagship properties like Apple, right? So they're constantly trying to figure out how does my traffic come from Apple? We can really help with those kind of things if you use Wi-Fi analytics. Along with that zonal concept, you can begin to tell cross-visit stories that are really interesting and that can really help drive both tenant acquisition and tenant renewal.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, those are so important to any retailer to understand and to the owner as well, right? How is this data also used to kind of create a more synergistic tenant mix? Because I know that's a really important thing. Just having all of the same exact type of tenant usually doesn't produce the kind of sales, the synergy that they need. So how can retailers maybe be smart about who they select as their new tenants based on the data that is being collected?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do really interesting things. So if it's a multi-location tenant, for example, that you're interested in, so there could be a threat of maybe a tenant, one of my tenants is opening up a new location at a new retail site within my visit radius. We can do really interesting things to figure out are your visits going to go up or down based on that data. But obviously, to do what you just mentioned is help me understand my tenant blend. You really have to have tenant level insights, right, inside of the property. So where are people coming from? You can power that. What's the relative traffic to a tenant or a part of the property? You can have to understand that. And it's really that cross visits concept, that unique visits concept, the return visits concept. Those are all 3 really, we describe them as like sub metrics or niche metrics, right? That really matter. So when you really invest and when you say, I really, really want to know, all this is possible, but you've got to move past that very basic total site, having one global zone and then just having one metric, which is a simple visit count. If you stop there, you don't go inside, you don't embrace zones, you don't embrace more unique metrics, right, that allow for tracking unique identity across different zonal concepts, then you'll never have that kind of critical insight that lets you do the tenant optimizations that you're talking about.
Yeah, and oftentimes I'm struck by how counterintuitive some of the tenant synergy is. I always think of the Lowe's next to the Home Depot is one. You wouldn't think that would be a good idea to have 2 of those kind of cohabitate, but it really is, because you see people that don't get what they need at Home Depot. Where's the next place that they generally go is a Lowe's, right? It makes sense to have that close by.
Yes.
I'm sure that retail owners are kind of maybe coming up with some insights that they wouldn't have expected, right? Things that they maybe didn't see as being synergistic that actually are.
And a lot of these insights, Franco, they're they're helpful, right? I'm aware that, the window to move a tenant around, it's an often a very infrequent window, right? So day to day, there's a lot of utilization of space specific data in the context of helping sales acquire those new tenants, right? Because sales it's a funnel. You talk to 10, you get one or two, right, on a close rate. So that's really where the use of data is most significant and has the highest ROI every day.
Absolutely. And one of the trends that I think is so fascinating in retail is that, retail real estate owners are kind of becoming business partners in a way. They are really trying to amplify the marketing, the reach of their tenants, right? Trying to really take the time to, bring as many people in and being smart with their own marketing, right? It's not just about marketing to your next tenant. It's also marketing to the user that's coming in. And I think what's really fascinating is some of these technologies, particularly Wi-Fi, can provide actually quite a bit of information to help those marketing campaigns. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a category of technology called Wi-Fi marketing. It's not the marketing of Wi-Fi technology to visitors. We didn't name the category, but we're aware of it and inclusive to it. So to all the marketers out there, it's the ability to turn your free Wi-Fi network, which hopefully you probably already have, most places do, into a lead gen engine for you. So really interesting. You've kind of got to learn about it in the built environment space, but it's immensely powerful. I mean, Wi-Fi marketing, constantly we're asking, like what percentage of all email database or visitor database does this grow for you? And consistently it's 90% plus. So if you are looking to have a recurring conversation with a visitor, right, and you want to own that channel, social media, you don't own it. You never know if you'll get shut off tomorrow. You don't also have the same controls marketers out there to directly reach out that you do versus email. We all know email is the best channel to maintain an audience. You too, Franco. And so Wi-Fi marketing is it. It's incredible. If you're spending, and then the ROI is just incredible. If you're spending $5 on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok to acquire an email, you'll spend 10 cents. And by the way, that person was on your property, right? It's not potentially on your property. So Wi-Fi marketing as a product category is just absolutely what the best marketers use. The ROI for marketers that use Wi-Fi marketing as a tool set is just 5x, on a cost per record basis. So it's really, really fantastic. That's all about acquiring and de-anonymizing the visitor.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as someone, like you said, that does quite a bit of email marketing, I know, how much work is done to try to incentivize people to give you their email, right? Generally, you're creating content, you're gating content, you're promoting it, you're doing all this stuff where I think, maybe some property owners don't realize that they have something that people are 100% willing to give their email up for, which is Wi-Fi, right? If you're walking around and you're trying to price check at a store and you don't have good, mobile service, which you usually don't in these big stores or big buildings, no one thinks twice about giving their email to a Wi-Fi, to get access. So it's kind of this hidden piece there that I think is really powerful that maybe they don't understand. And have you seen some of these campaigns be really successful? Maybe talk to me about the way that some of these campaigns have been able to actually help the tenants, right? Help in a measurable way, bring traffic.
Yeah, for sure. So the key thing here, talking to all the marketers out there, is understanding you must de-anonymize the visitor to build a relationship with them. So by focusing on Wi-Fi marketing, you're using the hook of free Wi-Fi to de-anonymize them and reward them, right? There's a cost to everything. So here's some free Wi-Fi in exchange. But what's really cool about that technology at this point is it's grown and matured. Is that, like, we realize that, again, using kind of your world, Franco, is that, listen, that captive portal that put your email in, and then there's a step where we can put an ad unit in. It's the rise of retail media, right? So retail media is a phrase that is being talked about a lot right now. So if you want to turn your captive portal into a retail media platform and monetize it directly, right? Not just say, I'm giving prospects, that's valuable, right? But to say, I put an ad unit in here, I had a sponsor pay $4,000 for 3 months, you can now cover your costs at minimum marketers, right? And you can quantify the eyeballs, they're on property, so they're really visible. What's that message? That message could be $5 off of coffee over here, or that's a lot, $3 off of coffee over here at Dutch Brothers, right? So when you realize that wherever you get eyeballs, it's really a retail media opportunity, an ad monetization opportunity, it gets really interesting. And you don't need programmatic ads. You don't need Google Sense. In fact, don't go there, but just set up a relationship with your tenants, right? And you're ideally going to have problems where there's a bigger demand that you can meet, and that's okay. That drives up the value of those ad units, right? But there's that, and then really cool things can happen based off the metadata that comes from all those logins. So if every time someone comes to your property there's some really cool technology. Not a lot of people have it. It's called Hotspot 2 or Passpoint. We're launching it. It allows for really, really long access periods into your free Wi-Fi network. It creates a premium experience. We recommend you think about it in the context of like a rewards program, which is also something that the retail marketers out there think about all the time. But when people keep coming back, or when they log in, that return visitor 3 times in 10 days, you can begin to send persona-specific messages, right? Mm-hmm. So if someone logs in 3 times in 10 days, tag them as a VIP and send them a specific message with a specific reward. That reward is something that comes from your tenant, right? It's a hook it's something. The reward is always something from a tenant, right? Every time that we see email promotions, we see them every day, obviously, from tenants, right? Whatever it's, and built environment marketers or retail marketers, to get people on site, it's usually, especially around an event, it's go to Freddy's and get $3 off burgers, or go over here and get something else. And so the tenants are always at the center and the hub of the promotion strategy and the retail media strategy. They drive the hook to get your visitors to come and see more value. Is that kind of what you're looking for, Frank?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And, I think it's so powerful in so many ways because, one, it's going back to leasing, it's something that you can offer, right? Maybe above and beyond the shopping center that's across the street. You will get X amount of promotions, right? We are able to kind of target these many people to give you a sense, give you the emails of the people who, are really coming in regularly and getting in front of those people. I think it's something that a lot of retail real estate owners are not thinking about and likely should, right? And are there maybe any best practices? Because I know there's a fine line between kind of Big Brother and targeted promotions. So what are some of the ways that you think that marketers can be smart about how they really provide that nudge without seeming creepy?
Oh man, I mean, Franco, when this comes up, we usually call it creepy marketing. So it always is, right? So like the key thing for it to be good trigger-based marketing and not creepy marketing is to make sure you have that relationship in play already, right? And one of the best ways to really do on-site marketing well, outside of Wi-Fi marketing, is fantastic, right? But it's going to be 10, 20% of visitors will fall into this bucket. If you want to, that's the percentage of people using free Wi-Fi on properties on average. If you want more than that, then you need to think about using something like a property-specific mobile app, right? We see this quite often, depending on where we are in the world. The Middle East, for example, has we're very active in the Middle East as well as North America, and there's a lot of site-specific apps. I would love to see more of those in North America. If I show up, if I look at all the buttons on a property-specific app, I see events, I see rewards, I see usually some kind of directory map or something that helps me find out where things are. And once that app is there, apps really unlock all of the really interesting capabilities to do push notifications. Push notifications really, they really need to come through an app. And phones are always going to win on things like geofencing, right? If my phone's inside that geofence, I know that Garrett's on property and I can send him a specific message. Wi-Fi network, if you don't have a mobile app, Wi-Fi network is the second best thing. It's absolutely awesome. Use those login triggers, right? There's a VIP message. There could be a message, we haven't seen you in a while. There's the first time visitor message, welcome to the property, right? Here's something to get you going. Go check out this tenant over there. That's a sponsored message. You can get started today. You don't need tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to build your own mobile app to make it work. But I think the best kind of good visit triggered messaging is really a blend of Wi-Fi marketing. Plus, if you can take it to that next level of visits. But even then, you still have to have a good way of deciding which tenant message am I going to serve? And the answer is you have to have a retail media strategy in play, which is something we're thinking a lot about and honestly want to get into, Franco.
Great. Well, this has been fascinating. Hopefully it was helpful for everybody listening. Garrett, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Franco. Appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Propmodo's Decoding Real Estate podcast. To listen to more episodes or explore our latest coverage of the commercial real estate industry, visit propmodo.com. That's PROPMODO.com.